Hi, welcome back to the second video of my channel. I'm Sydney, and today I wanted to make a little video about some of the symptoms that I experienced before I was diagnosed with ADHD in my sophomore year of college. So there were about 19 years of symptoms that I can now sort through and understand, okay, this is why I did that. So I was diagnosed when I was 19, my sophomore year of college. It was November, so I'm coming up on 2 years, and I can now see the symptoms that were leading up to this, even starting from when I was a very, very young, like elementary school, and I can see the progression of things. So yeah, these are a few things that I realize now were because of ADHD. So one of the first things that I noticed that I did when I was younger, starting in probably second grade, I noticed, is that I would hyperfocus on things. And a lot of the times this had to do with books. I was a huge reader and I got so excited about books. I could read a full-length novel in a few hours probably. I would take my books to school and I would read them in class to the detriment of learning anything from my teachers, because I would hide my book under my desk. Sometimes I wouldn't even hide it, and I would just read while the teacher was talking, sometimes the entire day. And the teachers did notice this, and I did get my books confiscated. I was punished for it, and I think a lot of them just thought that I liked to read. But I noticed that I have had hobbies through the years that I get really excited about, and I get so focused on them that I just forget everything that's going on around me. And often these hobbies don't last. Like, they don't last longer than a few weeks. I get so excited, I buy all the supplies for something, and then after 3 weeks, I have forgotten about it completely. So that's something that has happened many times through the years. I can count probably at least 10 hobbies that I've started and never finished. Something else that started when I was quite young, which I think is hard to differentiate when you're young, is emotional dysregulation and rejection sensitivity. I think this is difficult for anyone to identify at that age because most young children struggle with emotional regulation. We're not at the point where we can accurately communicate our feelings yet. But I can remember struggling in my friendships, the things that seem to come so easily to the other children in making friends, maintaining friends, just kind of enjoying friends, just didn't come naturally to me. I was constantly worried about what my friends were doing if they weren't with me, what they were doing with my other friends. And I was constantly worried that we weren't going to be friends anymore. And I think that that's something that just at that level that I was feeling it was not something that a neurotypical kid would probably be concerned about at that age, at first or second grade. So the emotional dysregulation part of that is that even to this day, I have reactions to things that are kind of disproportionate to the event that started them. So I can think of recently, I found out that one of my very favorite dresses that I love to wear, I had washed it on the wrong setting and it had shrunk to the size of a shirt, so I could no longer wear it. And that sent me down a spiral. This is embarrassing to admit, but I spiraled for several days, and it caused a large amount of body image issues, that I felt like even though my dress had shrunk, I had gotten bigger, and so many of the things that were going through my mind were just not proportional to what had happened to prompt them. And this is something I'm also consistently checking myself on, okay, I can get another dress. Yes, I did like it, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not the end of the world. I kind of acted like it was the end of the world, and I am trying to rein myself in with these things. So another symptom that I didn't realize was my ADHD was forgetting small details of things and kind of making small little careless mistakes. And this started again when I was young because I was in high-level classes, and I really should have been getting higher scores on my tests and exams than I did. And I had multiple times where teachers would come up to talk to me, go through my exams with me, wonder why I was taking the correct route and doing all of the math correctly, but not getting the correct answer. And it was because I was doing like basic addition wrong, and I just didn't have the wherewithal to go back and check my addition. And this is something that I think it has to do with like the dopamine reward response. Once you see the end in sight, it's really hard to be motivated to go back and look through the details of something. Like, you just want to be done. You want that rush of feeling like you've accomplished something. And at that point, all consideration of the little things kind of goes out the window. So I struggled with this in school. I struggled with this in a lot of my different job positions. And that was something that, even though I don't enjoy it, I do force myself to go back and look through the details of things, because it did come back to bite me multiple times before I started implementing that. And along with the kind of forgetting things theme, I lose everything. And I have been like this for as long as I can remember. My mom is also like this. She was diagnosed with ADHD shortly after I was. And I think a lot of people lose things on the regular. It is a human trait that's kind of hard to differentiate from basic normal activity. But I lose things like my phone in my hand, and I lose like my glasses if I'm wearing them. And I have to have a notes tab in my phone of everyday things and where I've put them, because I don't have a routine. It's hard to keep and maintain a routine, and it's the only way that I can keep track of things. I have a constant brain dump of where I've put things, and it's the only way that I can remember where things are, because object permanence is just something that's really difficult for me. Like, out of sight, out of mind. The second I put it down and I leave a room, I have no idea where it went. So having this notes app is something that I have been ashamed of, and it is embarrassing, and I feel kind of behind that I would need to do this for something that seems really basic that a neurotypical person would probably not need. But you know what? It's just, I've learned to adapt. I've learned what works for me, how to set myself up for success. Yes, it takes a little bit more effort, but it is worth it in the long run. So the next two things are two things that I think are very highly connected, and it's distraction and feeling sleepy when I'm understimulated or bored with like a lack of challenge. I can remember when I was in middle school, I had Spanish class first thing in the morning, and Spanish is something that I really didn't grasp. It wasn't something that interested me a lot. I found it difficult. I didn't find it very fun. And I had that class at like 7 a.m. And I can remember at least 2 different occasions where I fully fell asleep in class. Part of the issue was that the lights were off, so I had nothing to stimulate me into staying awake, and so I would fall asleep. And I was called out by my teacher for it, which is, kind of understandable. But I wasn't low on sleep. I wasn't physically exhausted. It was just purely that my brain felt like it didn't have anything to do except for go to sleep. And I've noticed that in like algebra, science classes that I didn't enjoy, that didn't present much of a challenge for me, that I just got bored in, I would just get sleepy. And that really was the inattentive part of my ADHD kicking in with the lack of reward response. So the final thing that I want to talk about is brain fog. And this, I think, is something that is important to talk about. It's a little bit of a touchy subject because brain fog can be common to anxiety, to PTSD, just to stress. It's common to a lot of different things. And I do think my brain fog occurs over the spectrum of my anxiety and my ADHD. So between the two, I don't get a lot of non-brain fog moments. My executive function is just circling the drain constantly. but it is something I have noticed, like when I'm driving, for example. This has gotten better. I have found things to keep me going while I'm driving, but for a long time when I was driving, I didn't have anything to do. Like I was a nervous driver, so I didn't listen to music. I didn't have anyone in the car with me, and I just sat in complete silence. And so there was not a lot to keep my brain focused on what was going on. And I would get this, I can't describe it as anything other than a fog that just clouds over your brain, and you feel like you can't get to the next thought. I was forgetting where I needed to turn at some points when I was driving, and it was just really scary. So I have things in place now that help me with it. So I hope that was maybe a little bit enlightening, eye-opening. I know that a lot of these symptoms are common for ADHD. They might not be that surprising, but when I was diagnosed, I was completely in shock. I did a lot of research about what I was experiencing, and ADHD never came up, particularly because of the emotional dysregulation, which I felt like it had to be a mood disorder. And so when I got that diagnosis, I just spent a lot of time kind of grieving and reflecting on what I would have been like, or what my relationships would have been like if I didn't have ADHD, or if I had known about it before. But there's nothing I can do now. Hindsight is 20/20, and I think now it's mostly just a lesson in forgiveness and forgiving myself for the things that I did and the way that I treated myself when I didn't know what was going on in my mind, and just having a lot of self-compassion, because I did what I could with what I had at the time, and that's okay. That's the very best that we can do. So I just made this in the hopes that someone else might watch it and it might help in one way or another, because my psychiatrist did tell me that a lot of women aren't diagnosed until college age or adult age, because our symptoms tend to be more internalized, less visible, starting from when we're children. So a lot of women go a long time without being diagnosed, and that in itself comes with a lot of grief over what could have been had we known. So if you're someone who's struggling with ADHD, maybe in the process of being diagnosed, I do encourage you to practice some self-compassion and some self-forgiveness, because that is probably one of the best things you can do for yourself. And just to try to make your mind as safe of a place as it can be, because it's where you live your whole life. So yeah, I'm hoping to come back with another similar video sometime soon. And yeah, thanks for watching.